And we're live now, so good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Ubuntu on Air. My name is Jose, and I'm an Ubuntu member broadcasting live from Peru. Wow, it's a long time since I've done that. Welcome to the Juju Office Hours, a regularly scheduled session where we talk with the Juju ecosystem team to try and solve your questions, show off what's going on in the Juju world. So here's George Castro to get you into this session.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It's been a long time since we've done one of these. Well, not too long, but there's been a lot. Actually, there's been a lot of things going on since the last time we did one of these. Is actually a more accurate description. OpenStack happened. The OpenStack Summit happened last week. We've got a ton of stuff that's churned through the review queue. Bunch of new charms landed. Both a stable and a development release of Juju itself, Juju Core. So where do we want to start, guys? I guess it makes sense to start with you, Marco, first. Kind of talk about, you just came back from Vancouver and the OpenStack Summit. We did a bunch of Juju stuff there. So why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, sure. So we talked about a lot of different things at the the OpenStack Developer Summit in Vancouver these last couple weeks ago. Just at a high level, some of the demos that were going on that were really interesting from a Juju perspective, and the OpenStack charms in Juju. We've added the ability to deploy OpenStack from trunk within the charm itself. So if you're doing dev work, if you're doing CI work, if you want to be able to start modeling your cloud off of Liberty, you can actually do that now in most of the components of the OpenStack charms, and the OpenStack charmers are working on making that an even better experience over this next cycle. They themselves also just had a release. The OpenStack charms released the 15.04 release of their charms, which has support for Kilo and starting support for Liberty, which is the next release of OpenStack. In addition, we did some demonstrations with benchmarking OpenStack clouds using Juju and Actions. Rally has an initial charm as well, if that's of interest to you. And we demonstrated a bunch of other components about using LexD and KVM and all the interesting things inside container technologies inside of OpenStack with Juju.
Sure. So before you continue there, when you say Liberty, that's the next version of OpenStack that's coming, right? That's the next development release, so that's what they're working on now, right?
Yes, that'll be available in October. So it's basically like the Wiley version of OpenStack. So they're actively developing on it. It is the master, the tip of trunk. You can't get any more new than trying to run Liberty right now, and you could start doing so if you're using these OpenStack charms.
Okay, excellent. You also said that there was an OpenStack charm release. Can you just give us a quick summary of how the release process for the charm relates to both the distro and to OpenStack itself? Because I know they release twice every 6 months, don't they? Every 3 months. Just kind of give people the
OpenStack charms do, yes, for sure. They release on a 3-month cadence. That way they can be able to supply new features and bug fixes over the cycle without having to wait for a whole 6-month window to pass. It's just one of the nice features of charms in general, so not tied to any cadence of the archive. They've chosen a 3-month schedule, which fits them well, but they could be doing daily releases if they so deemed. How that fits into the larger packaging updates, I'm not entirely sure. That starts to stray from my knowledge of the OpenStack world, but I know we do keep things packaged and updated and fresh in the Cloud Archive for the LTSs of Ubuntu, and we support back quite many releases of OpenStack, so you could deploy now with the charms anywhere from even before, I think, Icehouse, but basically from Icehouse forward, which is OpenStack's last long-term support release, are all deployable with the charms from the Ubuntu Cloud Archive on Trusty and Precise as well. So all that stuff is the work that those OpenStack charmers have been doing to keep that consistent, keep it stable, keep it crisp, and keep it fresh.
Okay, with that, we got our first question. Hazmat, hey, good to see you. Kapil asks, are there any good presentations on Juju for business-type audience, high-level benefits, what companies are using, etc.? In fact, there are, but I will have to get back to you on those. I'll be more than happy to send you a set, something that reads a lot better than all the code ones that we use in our Charmer presentations. I'd be more than happy to send those along, and I'll also check to see if I could just push those onto the website or something like that, and or the mailing list so it's available for someone. I don't see why we would keep something like that internal. I mean, it's high-level benefits and customers that are already public and saying that they're using Juju. So that is a good tip. I will take that as an item. While I write that down, okay. So who's next? Who's done? Who's reviewed something great this past few weeks that wants to give us some feedback on what they're seeing out there? Chuck, containers. Marco outed you, so you get to go next.
So, sorry, I missed the question, but to kind of catch people up to speed with what we're doing in the container ecosystem is today we've been doing a lot of work on kubes. One of the interesting things that we found about Kubernetes...
Whoa, wait. Give us a little bit of high level what you're working on. You're diving right into cubes, and unless you know what cubes is...
We've been working on charming up the Kubernetes ecosystem.
There we go.
Kubernetes is it's an elastic container runtime, basically, that allows you to turn several commodity hardware computers into a distributed way to run containers across each and every one of them, and they all work together in tandem. So if I have an application that's comprised of, say, 4 services, I can deploy that with a service on each of the machines, and then they get networking between the containers, and they can operate kind of in unison. So one of the things that we noticed is that Kubernetes is a very fast-moving project, and as we started to charm this, we were starting to target the point releases. The charms have come to a point to where they're maturing enough to where we're getting ready to add development focus on this, meaning that if you're a Kubernetes developer and you start hacking on the code locally and you want to stand up the cluster and see exactly what's happening, maybe you want to run regression tests, maybe you want to check a few different workloads that are important to you and how this responds with the modifications you're making, we're actually shipping the binaries off of your local machine that you're building into these charms as it's standing up the cluster so that way you get instant feedback of all the changes that you're making. To add value add to that, we're also pushing the CI story with Kubernetes a little bit further in the Juju ecosystem and making sure that we're standing it up. We're running different sanity checks. There's a few different example applications that are bundled with Kubernetes, one of which is the pet store. There's a guestbook application and a couple other different things that we're looking at getting underneath CI so we can get kind of a daily report of what's actually working based off of trunks, so we've got a good idea of what's going on inside of our charms in that ecosystem as well. That kind of wraps up with what we've been working on with Kubernetes. The other side to this is we've been landing a lot of work towards what we're calling seed charms, which are just initial proof of concept charms for some of the other ancillary Docker services. Some of which you may have heard of, like Doku, which allows you to build kind of a micro pass that allows you to use a Git-based deployment workflow, and it uses Heroku build packs if you're familiar with that style, where you just Git push to a remote, and then it automatically sets up and deploys your application. And it allows you to be a little agile about that. So you can use Juju to deploy the infrastructure that's providing the container runtimes. You attach Doku to your Docker node, and then you've got a Git-based deployment workflow, which is really nice for some people. The other side of that is we're also looking at software-defined networking. I've started working with Project Calico, and they've got a Docker Calico project, which is really interesting. It's just doing IP routing without diving too deep into the networking details. High expectations out of this project because it's not running anything through like a tunnel device. This is just strictly point-to-point networking. So whenever you use a different software networking technology similar to like Flannel, it's running over a bridge device, which is setting up an IP tunnel interface, and that actually reduces throughput from Gbps to like Mbps. And that's where Calico kind of comes in and is going to have an ability to shine because they're going directly over the interface. So if you're in a 10 gigabit network, you should have 10 gigabits. I think that that's the majority of what we could talk about outside of Console is another one that's coming, which is a service discovery language. It allows you to deploy what essentially works as a DNS server, and then you can attach that to Console template on your charms, which gives charm authors a new way to kind of register their container-based services and get service discovery across an ecosystem of services. etcd was just Rev 2's 2.0.11, which is the most recent release last time I checked. And we're also getting Docker Swarm, which will be kind of a smaller and easier to digest component that gives you an elastic container farm similar to Kubernetes. So lots of big updates coming from containers, and sorry if that was a whole herd all at once.
That was great. Do we expect a major version of LibSwarm anytime soon, or is this just something that just continually? Because I know Cubes is looking at 1.0-ish this summer sometime, right?
I don't have any insight as far as to if Cubes is going to land a 1.0 release soon, but I know that we're tracking the current head of that development. So what we're working on is we're trying to get it within parity, so whenever they land that major release, it's ready to go on the Juju charm.
Okay, awesome. Good to know. All right, that's good on containers, and I see Bruiser just joined us. If you have anything to add about containers, I know it's kind of calling all of that stuff just containers is kind of not fair. But it is what it is. Okay, so that's really great. Anything from, let's see who's next. Anything from the big data guys this week as far as updates to your charms? I know that we had some interest from the guys on Apache Ignite on working on a charm. Would love it if someone out there is interested in Ignite. That is, I'll get you a URL for the website. Apache Ignite. We'd love to work with someone who's interested in getting that charmed up, but it sounds like Amir and Corey, you guys have been pretty busy, and Kevin on a bunch of stuff, right? Why don't you guys give us a TLDR on what's going on there?
So the biggest update we have is we're getting the latest Apache charm in the charm store, and not only the charms, the bundles, and so on. So that should be done by the end of this week. So everybody should be able to use them. Go ahead.
So when you say the latest Apache charm, Apache is like 10,000 projects under an umbrella.
Man, I'm sorry. Latest Apache Hadoop charms.
Okay, that's really good to go. Okay.
Latest Apache Hadoop charms version 2.41. The last one we had in the charm store were Hortonworks, but this is pure open source Apache charm right now.
Oh,
and a bundle.
Brilliant.
So that should help everybody. And we also got Spark, the latest Apache Spark charm and bundles, and that should be in the charm store end of next week. And that is version 1.3.1. And we're getting bundles with Python Notebook, Apache Zeppelin, and so on.
Okay, that's really great. How are you guys digging Zeppelin?
Loving
an interesting bit. Okay.
Loving it, and also I sent a note to Zeppelin community, send them our bundle, and we got some positive feedback.
Okay.
They like it. They like how it is to set it up and get it right into the Spark cluster.
Okay.
So that's all I have.
Cool. Chuck, Kevin, anything from you guys? Not Chuck, Kevin. I'm sorry, Corey, Kevin.
Yeah, so I'm going to add one thing. So we've been working on these Apache charms for a while, and I threw a link out to the core bundle that we've been looking at for big data in the Pound Juju. One of the things that we found, though, which was interesting, is during our sort of final validation and testing that we were going through last month, we thought, you know, these things scale. Sure, it's supposed to scale. Looks like it scales. Probably scales. But then when we actually did the deployment and started scaling, for big data, we realized that half of our data, or half of our jobs, were being written out and distributed, and that was great. The other half, though, where the actual processing of the distributed data occurs, that was only happening locally on one node, right? And so we were having just terrible performance with our running big data jobs on our latest deployment, and it took a while to figure out, but it came down just to a simple configuration option in one of the Hadoop config files. But the long and short of it is, we made a mistake in just sort of assuming that scale was working because we did some local tests and we scaled a few nodes and didn't see any issues. So we just assumed if I can do 3 nodes, I can do 300, right? No problem. But it really wasn't until we hit 20 nodes and 50 nodes and a 100-node cluster that we really saw this performance degradation. So if I can give anybody some advice out there that we've learned in the last month, it's really, if you're working on a scalable project, don't just assume, and I know this is common sense here, but really don't assume that your scale is going to work, and really treat scaling like a first-class citizen and let that flesh out some of the issues. It took us at least a couple of weeks to really hammer through what was going on, and like I said, it turned out to be a simple solution, or a simple problem, not quite a simple solution, but That was my big lesson learned for this month, was just if you say you're going to scale, you better scale and look at it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And just so I'm sure, what exact version here of Apache Hadoop is this? It's hard because when you say Hadoop, there's so many components, and trying to map the individual component versions to what the entire thing is not.
Yeah, no doubt. You need a Rosetta Stone for it. So we're on Apache 2.4.
Okay.
And
241.
Sorry, 241. That's the name node. That's the yarn master. Those are all the components in our bundles or in our clusters that use Hadoop.
Mm-hmm.
We're all synced on Apache 2.4.1. I'm sorry,
okay.
on Hadoop 2.41.
Okay, and these I see on their website for 2.6 and 2.7. Are those the newer releases here? Is 2.4 the stable? I'm kind of confused.
Well, the 2.4 was the most stable at the time we started talking. And now I heard 2.6 becoming stable, so we will take that. But between that, we would like to add more features to it before we go to 2.6, like HA.
Okay.
So we're going to start in this version as still, like Hortonworks Cloudera, they're still using it as the most stable one. So we're going to stay on it probably for another couple months until we add HA and roll back and so features like that to it.
Cool. Yeah, I think it'd be cool when you guys do the announcement, you put on the list that all these are available to kind of outline a rough outline, right? Like we know 2.6 and 2.7 are out here, but we want to do HA first, blah blah blah, or whatever.
Good point.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the Hadoop website. I'm totally confused on what's.
Well, George, that's you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, just the amount of versions alone and the amount of components.
I know. It's confusing for everybody.
Yeah, but great work, guys. So we're gonna circle back. We're gonna circle back to Kapil's questions about Kubernetes because he had some on IRC while everyone else. Is there a way to document to run kube E to E on the charms? I don't know if you answered this already, Chuck. Do you want to revisit these? Or?
For the people that aren't familiar with this, is Kubernetes project actually developed an end-to-end test suite, which gives you kind of a sanity check on whether or not what you've stood up follows suit with all of the expectations from the Kubernetes project. They're going to deploy multiple containers. They're going to flex the networking. They're also going to run a couple of small perf tests and launch several containers and see where they actually pop up in the network. So if you deploy like a 3-node cluster, I'm expecting this to be distributed amongst 3 machines because I've got load balancers on one, I've got a database server on another, and I've got my app servers here. So this is coming in a future revision. You can run it today by actually remoting into the unit and running the E2E test. But what we want to do, and I would say expect this in the next 2 to 3 weeks, is a Juju action that once you've deployed the Kubernetes bundle, you can just target Kubernetes master by running Juju action do E2E, and it will actually execute that end-to-end test and stuff the results back in the action feedback. So if you do Juju action fetch the UUID of what you've run, you've got an actual report of what's happened. We've already started testing some of that with the pet store demo, and that's available today. Okay,
awesome. Hope that answered your questions, Kapil. If not, go ahead and plop another question on IRC. Kapil has another question, this time for the big data guys. Where does Kafka fit in your big data landscape plan / world domination ideas?
That's a very good question. We're going to start using Kafka for the real-time analysis and as a main data injection point. And that is on our roadmap to update the current Kafka charm and go to the latest one in next 4 weeks.
Okay, so next 4 weeks. That's awesome. You should answer all your questions in the next 4 weeks.
Well, that's why I've been saying that for the last 4 weeks.
Excellent. He goes on to say, what's the state of monitoring services in the Charm ecosystem? I guess this is a question for everybody.
This is actually a great question. We've recently had Zabbix release a suite of charms, I think 6 in total, which charm up their kind of core collection of Zabbix, Zabbix agents, the Zabbix UI, Zabbix server, and a few other Zabbix-specific plugins. These work with the existing monitors interface. A long time ago, when we originally started tackling monitoring in Juju, I think Clint Byram and a few others wrote a monitors interface. This allows you to have an agnostic way to describe how to monitor a service, and then just tools like Nagios and Zabbix can plug into that. So Zabbix currently utilizes that. We have some community-contributed Nagios charms. We're going to be spending some of this cycle kind of revamping the local monitors or monitors interface to kind of help bring it along to start describing things that weren't originally thought of that we've come across in the last couple of, last year or two of using Juju.
Mm-hmm. And any word from the Nagios guys? I know there was a bunch of Nagios stuff that we wanted to, that we're working on them to get added.
No updates. I know we've been talking with them about bringing Nagios in like Zabbix has to help kind of represent their monitoring stack in addition to other tools that are out there. So I'm not sure of any updates.
Yeah, Bruiser and I we'll follow up on that.
Yep.
They're up by him in Minnesota. Okay, so there's that.
Well, Kapil goes on to ask about
Yeah.
Grafana, Statsd, Heka, Collecti, Prometheus. So these are also all great tools, and this is a different kind of monitoring. This is, I guess, more of a machine level collection over time. They're still relatively new and being incubated. I know we've used Collecti quite a bit. We've used Collecti kind of bit. There's a couple of Chuck mentions, or will mention in a moment as soon as he unmutes himself. He has some updates about Heka. But yeah, we're still very interested in bringing those in. I know they're very much used by people who are using things like the Elk stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Grafana, and those guys as well. So we don't have any updates from them, but there are preliminary implementations of most of the charms you've listed, Grafana, Statsd, Heka, Collecti, that are available in a personal branch or some form or another. I'm not sure what our plan internally is. We'd like to help anyone who's interested in those components that want to bring them into the charm ecosystem. We'll be happy to help you, help guide you in that perspective. I'm not sure if we have any time from a core charmer perspective to add those into our ecosystem at the moment.
That pretty much covers what I was going to say, Marco, is the fact that we've got a lot of those services that exist in some form or another just on expiration in personal namespaces. And if you're looking to get started, those might be a great way for you to actually pull them down, see what they're all about, and then start adding features there, which would give you a good base to kind of springboard something into the store.
Okay, hopefully that answers those questions. I'll give the IRC lag there a minute to resolve itself. In the meantime, Marco is here to report on changes in core. Start by which the latest Point and Devil releases, so you can kind of tell us where we are on each Point release, like what version of Juju should I be on right now if I'm looking for the latest stable and beta, and then you're going to cover the stuff that just came into the stable release, and then you get that out of the way because that's boring, right? And get to the real meat of what's going on in Trunk and Devil because we like that.
Yeah, I'm just going to real quickly address the IRC lag. Another question is the monitors interface blocked about or documented, which actually brings up a much more interesting point of conversation, which we may need to cover in an additional, maybe next office hour. We could talk more about interfacing in general and documentation of how relationships interfaces are working. It's a really common problem. We don't have anything really blocked about the monitors interface, but that's a great idea for a blog post, and I'd be happy to sit down next week with myself or Corey or someone else here on the call to document just the monitors interface in general, how you can tap into it, how you can describe it for your charm, and get it into the docs so people writing them can know how to add and leverage these interfaces for the application-specific stuff. That's a great point. We don't really have that documented, so we can definitely take time to do that. But there is a larger question about how do we do interface documentation in general. I think we have some interesting ideas that we've been kicking around. We've been talking to other charmers, talking to other teams, talking to users and customers about this problem. And Ben, who's not here on the call, but he's been working on a proposal of a way to deal with this. So while that will definitely be sent out to the list when it's ready for review, I'd like to see if he can join us in the next office hour and talk more about that. But great question again, though. in the room.
For sure, that's been a long time pain point, I think, as far as you have to know the guy that wrote that interface to like kind of figure out what's going on there.
Or read a little bit of code, or a lot of bit of code. Cool. So features in Juju. So we had a release come up last couple of weeks. Juju 1.23.2 is the latest stable release. It comes with not just, in addition to the standard bug fixes and performance fixes that we've been doing in every release of Juju, it comes with a slew of new features that have been kind of nice and exciting, considering most releases have been quite, well, very low impact from a user perspective. They've been awesome, but most of the stuff has been done under the covers. So this last release brought a couple cool things. The first thing I want to mention is that it brings Google Cloud Compute Engine. So if you're using Google Compute Engine and you want to use Juju with it, you now have the ability to do that in 123.2 and above, and it's in the docs for how to configure and get started with that, as well as the default boilerplate that Juju brings you. So that's very exciting. It's quite an exciting cloud to see pop up, and now you can tap in and use all the Juju services you're used to against Google Compute Engine. In addition, we got a bunch of fixes to proxying. We had a really important feature land that was critical for a lot of work that I've been working on, Juju Actions, which is this idea of embodying tasks or scripts or one-off runs that you normally do, kind of adding a way to model that inside the charm. So instead of having to run SSH commands or using Juju Run, you can actually type out what the command does, parameters the user supplies, and it gives you a mechanism for feeding back to the user what's happening during that run, if the run fails, why it failed, and then results of that run. And the user can then initiate it asynchronously like you normally can with all Juju commands, or initiate it with a blocking mechanism so that it will run until it exhausts and provides the results. So that's quite an exciting feature to land in Juju, one of many to come in the next coming releases. Backing up and restoring Juju environments was improved. From an operator standpoint, there is a new blocking feature for Juju where you can block specific actions from occurring. So if you have a production environment that's shared with many users in like a bastion or jump station scenario where you have a shared instance that you have access to Juju, you can actually block things like destroying environments, destroying services, removing machines and units, so that if anyone issues that command, they'll get a message back with whatever you've supplied as a message. So that's super helpful from an operator standpoint. We've also got support for systemd as an init system. So if you're using Juju with Vivid and beyond, so for the next LTS and going forward in Ubuntu, you'll be able to use Juju with systemd. This is just for components that are installed from the archive and that Juju installs if your charm installs an upstart script. While it'll still work if you have the upstart init system installed alongside of it, it's an added dependency that you need to include, and there's a link to a conversion guide for upstart to systemd coming around. In addition, we have 2 experimental features that were included inside of 123, which will be available in 124. The first one is service leader elections, which is a topic that's been talked about and discussed and designed to great extent over the lifetime of Juju. It is now coming through to fruition. What this is Juju will select and elect a leader of a peer of services. So if you have multiple units running behind a service, Juju will assign a leader, and in doing so, you actually get a set of events that are modeled around that, hooks that are executed that allow you to know when a leader is elected, and the leader then has the ability to send and set messages to its constituents or peers or other units inside that service group using a leader get and a leader set command. There's also a leader elected and a command to check if you are the leader or not. So all those were added in the last release. It's very exciting if you're modeling things like clustering or any kind of peering or anything that requires you to have some kind of a leader election. Juju can help you solve that now from a core. So there's been a lot of workarounds that have been written in the community. There's lots of charm uppers that were written around this. This simplifies a lot of that code and brings a lot more of a robust and reliable and observable pattern to Juju in the model. So that's very exciting. The next one is a bit of an issue that we've had with networking. It's how you are modeling LexC containers or KVM instances inside of a cloud where they don't necessarily have addressability outside of the machine they're running on. The experimental feature, again, it's experimental in 123. You need to use a flag to enable it, just like leader elections. But we'll see them become GA in the next 124 or 125 release. This has addressability to LexC containers inside of MAS and AWS initially. So what that means is that if you deploy a LexC container on one machine and a LexC container on another machine, they will, on Amazon and MAS, have addressability to each other. So they'll be able to communicate across the machine node. In previous times, you've had to use some supplementary SDN or some overlay network to make that possible. This is great to see it coming as something native in Juju, and I imagine as we roll out to other providers, OpenStack, Azure, and such will have that functionality ported to those clouds as well. But again, it's initially only for those two substrates as this experimental feature exists.
Kapil was also asking what the state of networking in general is.
Yeah, in general, I'd be happy to talk about that. It is something that's on the roadmap now. One of the features that's coming in 124 is the ability to model storage. So that's the feature that was kind of prioritized first. So in the 124 beta 5 release, if you type Juju storage, you will get a list of subcommands you can do, managing storage pools, volumes, listing them, how they are attached and managed and modeled in the ecosystem. Charms can also declare types of storage they require, and you can model that storage down into the service component. Much like storage, networking is something that we'll see either as an experimental feature in 124, if not a complete feature, or something that we see in 125 where you can actually start modeling for substrates that make use of that expose that, things like MAS and I imagine other public clouds that have a networking component that you can tap into. You'll see the ability to start modeling isolation of networks within Juju as well. So that's something that we are coming down the pipe. I'm not sure exactly when we'll expect to see that. I know storage is something that we've hit in the 124 beta, but I've not seen anything about networking yet in the beta.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, that's all I have for updates.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I mean, there are a couple other features coming in 124 I could talk about, but storage is kind of the big one that's landing.
Yeah.
Juju Publish is something that'll be available. It's a different way to publish charms to the charm store. There's a Juju user command, which will give you the ability to manage multiple users in a Juju environment, and then also ability to log into Juju environments from within the command line. That's most of the new things. And a machine management command. Instead of doing Juju add-machine, it's a Juju space machine command for better verbiage.
That was an interesting one. I hadn't known about that. Any other little... status. Isn't this next version where they're going to flip the default status?
We're not. They're definitely not flipping the default status until a 2.0 release. They won't break compatibility with anyone. I'll make sure everyone knows that. No compatibility breaking. But going forward, if you type Juju status -- format equals tabular, you will see what the new status will look like when Juju reaches its 2.0 backwards breaking compatibility viewpoint. It's quite classy. We also get status sets. So Juju charms will be able to start relaying information back to the user, whether it is something like the charm is blocked and waiting for you to take action against it, whether it's setting a configuration value or adding a relation, whether it's in maintenance mode, which means it's churning, it's processing, whether it's waiting for something to happen, waiting for credentials to be sent across a relation wire, or waiting for something to complete, and also that it's active. So previously, a big question we've had is, what is Juju doing when it says it's started? So previously, we had a very simple state transformation. We went from allocating a machine, installing the service, and then started. And started actually encompassed a large set of hooks that were firing. In the new status features in Juju 124, you will still have an agent state field, which will go through those basic dumb transitions. But you will also get a service and a workload state. So you will now know if a machine is idle or if it's executing and what hook it's executing. And then if the charm adds any additional details of the service state, whether it's busy, it's broken, it's blocked, or it's active, and a message that's supplied from there. So you get a much cleaner, concise view of what the service and workload are doing, and it adds a status history command. So you can see a history of the actions that were taken by a service over time by typing Juju status -history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to kind of add on, for those of you that are using Juju today, when you get a status on a service, you basically get, there's what? Installing agent, and then everything's okay or everything's failed. But we don't really know exactly if the service is really okay. All we know is that everything finished without an error, which is, of course, not good. So now this gives charm authors the ability to be really more granular so that when people do a status, Juju stops lying to them as far as what it knows and what it thinks it knows. So that's a really important feature there that I hope charm authors, as you guys are listening to this, that's, in my opinion, one of the very first things you should be doing. Just grep through your charm, look, any time that you Juju log might be a good place to consider sticking in a status update. Would you agree with that?
I agree, and I will include a link to the rally charm I wrote. The charm is very simple, very straightforward, but makes heavy use of the status set. And you'll see that in the demo I gave at ODS with benchmarking with rally and Juju actions, is that it quite illuminates quite nicely exactly what the workload's doing. So when you're giving a talk, you're not just staring at a screen that says started. It actually says,
right,
I'm installing things, I'm relating, I'm blocked and waiting for a relation to Keystone and other things like that.
Right. Instead of just ready. Right. So,
great question.
any other?
Are there docs for this in the channel? There are not docs currently for this. There need-to-know basis, apparently. We are pleading the Juju core team to help complete docs for all of the new features they're writing as we quickly approach the end of the beta and soon to be released 1.24. So we will be looking to get docs written and drafted and put into the docs so that they will land and coincide with the release of 1.24. But we do need help getting those docs written, as with the case of any project, I think. But there aren't. But we have docs by example, things that we figured out through the last couple of months of using 1.24.
Good question, Jay. Any other questions there as we start to wrap it up? How about you guys, my esteemed panel? Is there anything that you've thought about in the last few minutes that you want to toss in as far as a summary, or is that basically it? Any interesting reviews that you guys hit this week that you thought were cool? I saw reviews on Kibana, NTP, MongoDB, Flannel Docker, always coming in fast anyway. New bundle format. Do we want to talk about that in this meeting, or come back around to that? Because that one's kind of an entirely new thing. Is that targeted for 1.24? That's a 2.0 thing, right, Marco?
Well, there's a slight modification to the bundle format where it's kind of slightly more collapsed and some slight changes to verbiage in the bundle format, but the Juju Charm Store will maintain forwards. Will be able to port those new things.
Right. Yep. So nobody flip out. No one's rewriting bundles, except to update the versions in them, of course. And with that, Jay or Kapil, any other questions in IRC, or someone we haven't heard from before I wrap it up? Oh, Chuck brings up a good point. If you're going to DockerCon, we are going to be hosting on the Sunday night before at Yelp's offices. Thanks to Yelp for hosting us. We're going to be doing a orchestration panel. We call it Conducting Systems and Services, an evening about orchestration. So we got a great panel put together with a lot of people who are thought leaders in this space. So Bill Farner, Jesse Frizzell, Michelle Hashimoto, which I think would be awesome to get him there, Kelsey Hightower, Jeff Lindsay, and Ben Saller, who's going to represent how we see the world going as far as orchestrating containers. And John Willis, Bacigalupe, will be moderating the panel. So I sent that link to the mailing list, or you can just go to insights.ubuntu.com and look under events. I've sent one-of-a-kind, one-print only Juju/Docker T-shirts, which the design is really cool. They came out great. And I was just informed that the budget for the booze was approved, so it should be a fun time. So definitely join us there. Thanks again to Yelp for hosting us, but space will be limited. So there's a Eventbrite link that you can click through on there and sign up as quick as possible. And we look forward to seeing you guys at DockerCon. And with that, if we don't have any other comments, we'll go ahead and see you guys next time, which is, let's look at the calendar. Hold on. People call my calendaring into question, so I just want to do it all at once here. It's going to be June 18th. I'll go ahead and send out a reminder to the list. I'll send out links to this video, Marco, to your video at OpenStack, a link to the DockerCon event, and there was one more thing. A link to the rally charm I think would be excellent, so people can check out how to do status stuff. Just pass those to me on IRC, Marco, and I'll send them out to the list. And with that, we'll see everyone June 18th. Have a great day.
Check future events at ubuntuonair.com/calendar. We'll see you around.